And welcome to the show, Chance Garton. Chance, where are you?
I am in dad bliss. I'm blissing out. Just had a new baby, so I'll probably bring that up more often than is appropriate. But we live in Southwest Missouri,
All right.
in a pretty medium-sized town, surrounded by family. Low level of insanity in this place. Really grew to appreciate it after cooties popped off and the rest of the world went full retard. We've been very happy here.
It sounds a bit like where I live in Switzerland. So we didn't, here we didn't really go. I mean, there was all the restrictions and stuff, but Switzerland was pretty lax compared to most, but certainly where I was. You could go out and do what you wanted. No one really cared. So that there was a little period of time where it was a little bit restrictive or quite restrictive, but then all kind of fell away quite quickly. So it wasn't too bad. And so what would you classify? I know you're a podcaster and a researcher, and we're going to talk about some fun stuff today, but what else are you doing?
I am a biofield tuner. That's a big part of my life outside of doing podcasts and researching, as you alluded to. Biofield tuning is the syntropic process of restoring stuck or lost life force energy back into circulation with the rest of the body or the biofield. It is a very powerful modality. I've had incredible results with clients. I started it because it gave me a big shift in my life and in my health as soon as I started trying it out on myself. And so that's the other half of my identity, I guess, if we identify by our occupations. And I'm actually quite happy to identify myself by my occupations, maybe not like most people. I love what I do, and tuning is super interesting. That is a huge can of worms because in my experience, it proves the depth psychology model that was popularized by Carl Jung, that there's an internal world that is reflected in the external world, and that all the events of our life are perfect mirror to our inner thoughts and our inner beliefs. And so that's a big part of what I do as well.
So how did you heal yourself then?
Oh, yeah. I've told this story a bunch of times, so I'll maybe make it a little condensed,
Yeah, make
especially
it
because
short.
we have so much gravy to ladle. But I had this recurrent shoulder injury, and it was pretty severe. Couldn't raise my arm over my head. With that, I couldn't even do it. And it was lasting for many months. And I got hip to the work of Eileen Day McCusick, who's kind of like my mentor in this field, and picked up one of her weighted tuning forks, a device called the Sonic Slider, started using it directly on my arm, and the injury was resolved in a matter of days, didn't come back because the external life situation that was correlated to that injury also resolved. So there was no, one, you work on one and it helps fix the other. It was kind of shocking, the things that had to change in my life to resolve that injury, but all for the better, much, much better for me overall, and helped me reshape my expectations about what life is like and what I identify in myself as valuable. Because in a nutshell, I didn't realize that I've been living my life with a value system that put an emphasis on my worth being derived from how patient I was to just take kind of like abuse from close relationships and be kind anyway. So I was living that victimized empath, versus mean vampire people thing, and was repeating that pattern over and over again because in my mind, I thought, this is what makes me good, is that I put up with this and I take this. And now my life's not like that at all. I have great boundaries. I got great relationships. Everybody's in coherence together. And that was what biofield tuning taught me about myself. That was the biggest and most important shift I needed to make. But the essential theory of it, to boil it down in a quick nutshell, is that your energy field has an anatomy. And so there is energy that can get stuck off balance to the left, right, front, or back in the roughly 6-foot bubble around your body, which is a measurable thing even by the science trademark. We have an electromagnetic field around our body that is our body's inside of it. And that field is actually your mind and your memory. And its flow or lack of flow constitutes how well you can think, how clearly you perceive, and what kind of experiences you draw to yourself as well. And so whenever you are examining somebody's energy field with tuning forks, is what I do, you're able to find the dissonant pockets or stuck pockets of compartmentalized energy. You're able to tell how old the person was when the particular belief or repressed emotion got hung up there. You're able to guide them through the process of releasing that energy by changing their belief or expressing the emotion. And then the body has correlating, healings that occur as it gets that energy returned to itself, that heightened potential comes back into play. It's a consistent anatomy. It's the same for everybody. We have, where it's at in relation left, right, tells you exactly the general outline of what it is you're looking at. And it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. It bridges the gap, I think, between science and woo quite perfectly. It's repeatable. It's a system, but it's also just as much derived out of like intuition and kind of like psychic insight. So it's really fun.
So is this based on the principles? Because I remember I was reading about that used to have Tesla machines and 100 years ago, and they were these machines that you put in. They were in barber shops and places that you could easily access them, and you'd go there and you'd basically get a vibrational healing done by this Tesla machine. And is that this? Are we talking a similar sort of idea there?
It's not outside of similarity. It's not exactly the same thing, but the whole biofield hypothesis is based on the electric body. So our bodies are electric. The world is electric. Eileen McCusick actually wrote a great book about this called Electric Body, Electric Health. I highly recommend that if people want to learn more about how bioelectricity works. And those Tesla machines, they're great because they're basically they're like recharging your battery. So that's the most important thing, is to keep yourself in a state of charge. And with all of the dissonance in our environment, in our lifestyles, it's easy for our batteries to get low and depleted. And then with the stock energy I'm referring to that gets compartmentalized and lost access to based on our beliefs or repressions, then that is basically like a battery that can't charge past a certain point. So yeah, those Tesla machines are great for charging you up, just the same as sunshine, healthy food, clean water, being on the earth, grounding, all of that, laughter, levity, all of that. But if your battery just can't get it charged past a certain point because not all of it is accessible, then that's only going to help you to a certain point. But those machines are really cool. My friend Clive has a lot of those.
Is that Clive DeCarl?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I'd love to speak to him. He's a very interesting guy, and that's who I heard it from through that.
Yeah, he's very, very good guy. Super accessible. I'm sure you could get him on.
Wow, I'd love to. The interesting thing for me is that this ties into why I wanted to speak to you anyway, is, I used to be, well, I think actually I was pretty in tune with things weren't, how would you describe it? When you're younger, you're a bit more intuitive. And I realized quite early on that I wasn't entirely happy with how I saw the world, basically how I saw the world, and how, we had to basically tamp all that down, push it all down, and fit in and become, a good, worker, I guess you would call it. Not that I was ever really a good worker, but there you go. We, and up until relatively recently, within the last 5 or 10 years for sure, I would have looked at any alternative healing or alternative modalities, or whatever you want to call them, as complete nonsense, complete bunk, and woo-woo, as you mentioned. But now my mind is completely open. And as I was just saying to you before we started here, I have a friend who does bioenergetic healing as well. And I go to see him probably once a year. And it's quite remarkable how you feel afterwards.
Yeah, a lot of my clients, once we get people into a good shape, they're only going to come back maybe once a year, sometimes in 2 years. But there's also people that we need to do more extensive work. So we might see each other every 2 or 3 months for a while, and then kind of get in a rhythm of 6 to 12 months. But there's a lot of charlatanry out there with energy healing. I'm not like going to call out anybody specific, but when you're in the realm of what appears to be woo, like you say, and the placebo effect, which is not actually an answer to what is happening, but it is something that's real, that you believe something's going to work, it can have an effect, can kind of let people who are a bit deceptive or lazy with their methods get by and still have some positive effect. So, I mean, that's cool, but there's a lot of charlatanry out there with energy healing, especially in the realms of like take this multi-$1,000 class and we'll attune you to the master Reiki energy and basically give you a permission slip and certificate to do something that you actually can just do yourself. You can give yourself permission to do. That was it for me, actually. I am self-taught in the modality that I do. I read Eileen's books about it, but I had to prove to myself there was a there without being just told what to do and what to look for specifically in like a class setting. And I think that that's a big part of it is there's many people who think that they need to be told exactly how to do that type of work. And they need to be given a step-by-step process. And if I'm not following the instruction manual, then I must not be doing it right. But I like to say all the time that when you're doing this type of, when connecting to the source energy of reality, which I think our life force energy is the primary source. It's the exact same thing as the source. It's an indivisible, infinite, prior to material, prior to time, prior to space, essence that is indivisible between all beings and all times. So if you're working with that energy, if you're tapping into that energy, there's a point where you have to get comfortable with, to some degree, making it up as you go. Not making it up in a disingenuous way, but like, okay, what's in front of me? What does this call for? How can I creatively address this individual's needs? And so, I mean, that's why I still look into lots of other modalities that I can fold into what I do, like a MMA style approach. I'm a big fan of internal family systems for that, like looking at the parts of somebody's psyche, sometimes needing to address them individually. And even every once in a blue moon, we might have to exercise an attached spirit of a deceased ancestor or something along those lines. I don't really like to do that, but occasionally it presents itself. So you got to be able to be creative. You got to be comfortable with feeling like you're making it up without feeling like you're faking.
I had that experience when I had the subtle energy healing, the bioenergetic healing, and that was having a couple of entities, well, quite a few actually. I think it was 6 entities taken off me, and I had an elemental, which I got a bit freaked out at. I wasn't sure what the hell that was, but so the reason I wanted to talk to you, I didn't realize you were doing this kind of energy healing, and that's something that I would like to speak about probably another time, because that's
thanks for letting me advertise it though.
Yeah, well, okay, this is a good point. Why don't you give us your socials and where people can get a hold of you, because people tend to reach out after listening to these things.
Oh yeah, innerversepodcast.com is where you're going to find my stuff. I do have an Instagram. You can DM me there. I will eventually see it probably. And other than that, Telegram is pretty good. My email address is going to be on my site. The biofield tuning stuff is going to be very findable on my site too, with a lot of information. I like to educate about it as much as I like to practice it, because I want to see more people in the world doing it. So if you do go to my website, innerversepodcast.com/sound-healing, you will find a bunch of videos. You will find a bunch of resources that I've put into the most efficient way possible, packaging wise, for you to understand your biofield anatomy, what happens in different parts of the body, how they correlate to different types of emotions and beliefs. And with just that knowledge, like there's a set of slides I put up on there that has each of the energy centers or chakras described in the biofield anatomy system. You could potentially resolve a lot of stuff on your own that is simpler. Like you'll maybe have a better idea why you got a certain injury recently and what to look for in your life and in your patterns so that it can heal properly or not come back. So that's important to me. I want people to be able to do this for themselves. But sometimes there's things that are too close and we really need another person to look at for us. Like I've been going to a really good chiropractor for just that reason. Not that I was in bad shape, but that, just to see what's there and maybe what I was managing and coping with and not even realizing that I was managing and coping with. And you sometimes just need an external objective look.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of them too. Again, all these things I would never have touched 5 or 10 years ago, no chance. But I once or twice a year, I'll go and see a osteopath or a chiropractor. But so what I was going to say, the reason I wanted to talk to you is because after listening to your podcasts, and you've done hundreds of them as well, I'm like 800 or something.
Really? Sounds like right.
yeah, there's a lot, and here's me in 116 or something, 17, whatever I'm on. But one of the reasons I started this podcast was to get people like yourself come on, and I can talk to them and ask them questions and find out more about, well, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's not the hidden world, but it's the stuff we're not taught, the stuff we don't learn about. And, after listening to your podcast, after reading your stuff, I realized that, you're way further down the road than I am on this one. So when was it for you that you started getting, starting to ask these questions?
Man, that's a tough one because it's a gradient, right? I remember probably one of the first, like what you would call occult things I started to investigate was shamanism. And my interest with that kind of coincided with dipping my toes into psilocybin as a young person, early 20s. Had some very profound experiences with the imaginal realm, we'll call it, through active imagination practices, shamanic journey work, stuff of that nature, that really gave me information that I shouldn't have been able to have by physical means, that was applicable to my life, led me to synchronicities that were beyond beyond materialism's bounds and all that. So maybe that's the first thing for me. But in terms of, I think what you're alluding to more recently, and in my work, is the occult nature of symbolism, the nature of language itself, all of that probably really sparked my interest when I came across my buddy Dylan, who you've had on. So I would say I've always been interested in those topics, but getting serious about figuring it out and doing the work myself to elevate my perspective and gain the keys to understanding, that came about after finding Dylan's work in 2019 and following the threads, the breadcrumbs that he laid out. And then once I had the keys that he showed, and followed the sources that he talks about in his books, did audiobooks for him, recorded those. And, now I'm kind of on my own journey with it. What my big interest is now is like the philosophy side of it, because I feel like I've got the system down in terms of the priesthood and the astrotheology that is encoded in everything mythological and religious. And now I really want to get my arms around philosophy itself, so that I'm not just following the trail of the universal system that seems to have existed in time prior to our recorded history, or that has been covered up. I also want to know, like, where's the value in this? Why did this persist so long? How did this arise? Why is this a perennial philosophy? Like a big fascination for me in the last couple of months has been when I realized that the deluge myth, like Noah's Ark and all the dozen or 24 other versions of it that exist, are all also creation stories. And that there's this thing that is coming through human imagination, even in pop culture, that is not really being recognized by 99.9% of people, of this destruction and regeneration of the world motif and the cycle of that. There's something going on that I can't explain yet, but that human beings just keep telling the story, and they don't even know they're telling it a lot of times. And they tell it with the same type of components in the symbolism and in the narrative, whether or not they're conscious of it. So that blows my mind.
Well, I did a podcast recently with a guy. We were talking about the Anunnaki. He went pretty deep on that, and I know a bit about it, and we talked about it, and it's there. Some of it you think, wow, it's so crazy that it's is this for real? But then you see that it's written down.
Is it like a Sitchin's thing? Is that correct?
No. He's he's a computer scientist, so he was taking it from like a tech. He's reading the story from like a tech perspective of, he's like, they're talking about cloud computing and they're talking about this kind of thing. And so it was quite fascinating, but we ended up talking about so there is this story. There is, what we do know is that a lot of this information is being held or is being kept from the general public. And what's kind of got me down this sort of, I think, is the same route as you're going down, is basically I just want answers. I like to know what's going on. Why do we have these myths? Why are these myths? They're almost mocked. If you bring up Noah's flood, they'll go, "Oh, here we go." People will just dismiss you. But when you start reading and looking more into it, you find, as you said, that this is a worldwide phenomenon. I didn't know that. I had no idea. And then you find out that the Bible in the Council of Nicaea, in 325 AD, I think it was, is when the church officials got together and decided which books were going to be in the Bible and which books weren't going to be in the Bible. And then the ones that left out were the ones that were kind of talking about wouldn't necessarily say Anunnaki, but going down that same route, that there were some, like a master race of gods or demigods that were directing the human race thousands upon thousands of years ago, which absolutely, completely, if you're listening to this, sounds crazy.
I haven't seen what you're talking about in terms of apocryphal Christian texts, unless you're talking about the Nag Hammadi stuff.
Yeah, that too.
But that wouldn't have been involved in the Council of Nicaea, and I'm very skeptical about the provenance of the Nag Hammadi. But go on, I'm sorry.
No, it's what I'm trying to say basically is the information is out there. It's just been curated to a certain end so that certain people know it, or we are led to believe that this is what we're supposed to believe, but yet those at the top will know a different side of things. They probably know the deeper aspect, the more esoteric aspect of it. So do you see what I'm trying to say? There's a lot of stuff that we're not being told about, but you can freely find it. But what for me is trying to put it all together and finding out which ones, or if any of them are correct.
I stand a bit apart from a lot of researchers in this field, because where the sensational, very fun, bombastic conclusions that are very popular are spread around, I'm not accusing you of anything here, so just hear me out. But when we say things like, well, clearly the people at the top know something that they're not telling us, I look at it, I used to think that way, but now I look at it like, actually, the difference between the people that know something and don't is the people that know something went and looked for it, rather than not being told. I mean, is there supposed to be like a public service that tells you all the esoteric secrets of history and the universe?
Good point.
I mean, obviously it would be nice if public schools provided that service, but we got to also consider, what is the point of public schools, right? Public schools is developed so that people would be better order followers and die in war without running away and going back home. That's a fact, objective fact. And also for the whole, my friend George, told me the acronym DINK, double income, no kid households. But for the double income possibility of, a society of worker bees, they need free daycare for their children. So, of course, there's really nothing in that gives a imperative to teach useful information or esoteric or philosophical information. I'm trying to do my best to just revoke all the blame that I've put on anything external and just go, well, but what if it's on me? What if it's on us? And I think that there's nothing about the deep secrets of philosophy and history in terms of what's been written, what texts are out there, that is inaccessible to us, except with the caveat that the Internet Archive has been attacked recently, and so a lot of the books are harder to get to, which that's got me sweating a little bit. I'll be honest, that got me a little sweating. But I think that it's there for us to find. I have a very specific worldview around truth, which is that, truth is synonymous with reality, correct? So reality is everything around you, everything that exists. Yes. So that means the truth is always there. Wherever you're looking, wherever you're at, the truth is in front of you. Now, that's where language comes in. That's where symbolism comes in as so useful in the depth psychology side that I was talking about, because sometimes the truth is encoded in a way. Sometimes it's symbolic, but it's always there. So the more language you have, the more symbolic literacy you have, the more you can read the room that you're in, the more that you can look at your own experiences like a dream interpretation and see how, even stuff that you've been hiding from yourself or not wanting to face is knocking on your door constantly. That's my take, is that the truth is actually, all you can do to avoid the truth is distract yourself and put up filters. And there are obviously social engineers that are at work distracting and creating filters in people's minds, giving them the offer to do so, to self-filter. But I don't think the truth can be hidden. I think that as soon as you start asking for it, it's there.
Well, that's a very, very good point. And I've been guilty in the past. Well, I still am. But you kind of, when you find something that's very
interesting.
All are. It's
Layers.
Yeah, and there's just so many layers. And when you think you know something, then suddenly you don't. So you talked about philosophy. So let's maybe just skip to that. What I've been literally just started reading about Gnostic Christianity, so early Christianity. And again, I literally know very little about it, but I don't know if you know anything about it.
A thing or two.
Okay, right.
I'm going to have like the not popular take about it again, but also the less boogeyman take.
Okay. No, there's no, based on what you know and what you're studying and you're researching has got you to. So what you talked about philosophy then. So what's the philosophy, or which philosophy, or what is your own philosophy towards all this then?
Well, okay, you're talking about Gnostic Christianity?
Well, not necessarily. I'm just talking about in general, since you've gone into all this thing. But you can talk about Gnostic Christianity if you want.
Well, that's a big, what's my philosophy is a big question, because it's like there's categories, right? But I really love this dude, Godfrey Higgins, who wrote in the early 1800s. He has a humongous book called Anacalypsis. And I've quoted this before, but it's been a while, so I'm going to dust off this quote. He says, "Of the sayings of the wise men, there was not one probably more wise than that of the celebrated know thyself. And probably there was not one to which so little regard has been paid. It is to the want of attention to this principle that I attribute most of the absurdities with which the wise and learned, perhaps in all ages, may be reproached. Man has forgotten or been ignorant that his faculties are limited. He has failed to mark the line of demarcation beyond which his knowledge could not extend. Instead of applying his mind to objects cognizable by his senses, he has attempted subjects above the reach of the human mind, and has lost and bewildered himself in the mazes of metaphysics. He has not known or has not attended to what has been so clearly proved by Locke, that no idea can be received except through the medium of the senses. He has endeavored to form ideas without attending to this principle, and as might well be expected, he has run into the greatest absurdities, the necessary consequence of such impudence." I think, though,
I feel attacked, Chance.
On my channel, we call that vertiginous burn. We call that a vertiginous burn because it gives you a sense of vertigo. Now, what he's saying there, though, is that as philosophy and mythology and religion have layered on top of itself over time, and there's even been bad actors involved that are purposefully deceptive, or they're esoteric in their writing, or they're teaching on purpose just for self-protection or for the preservation of a certain social order, well, then there's the next generation and the next generation that come along, and they miss the mark on what was actually being said esoterically, or they fetishize the symbols and the rites and all that of the previous generations. By that, I mean they kind of deify things without understanding what they actually meant. Again, missing the esotericism of it, missing the allegorical nature of things. And before long, a few generations pass, and now you have people that are looking at stories, miraculous, absurd, completely divorced from anything you've ever, or anyone you know has ever witnessed with their own senses or that exist in nature, and believing that those things are true and literally the case. And that is the snowball that, me and maybe a few other people are trying to hold up and stop. Let's melt this snowball down and get back to what's inside the core of it, right? Let's go back to the middle, the center of it, and get rid of all of this slush and absurdity. And I think that like to apply that to, say, Gnostic Christianity. Now, that word is so troublesome for me because I love the word. I love the meaning. Gnosis means knowing. I love the Gnostic Church and Academy of Lord Jesus Christ, run by my great friend and neighbor, Marty Leeds. Wonderful teachings going on there. Not at all the garden variety type of pop culture Gnosticism that gets parroted around in conspiracy podcasts.
So what was the name of that, please?
The Gnostic Academy of Lord Jesus Christ.
Wow. All right.
Yeah, he does Sunday sermons on YouTube live every morning. Really heavy on the math mysticism. Great guy. And like me, Marty looks at the pop culture Gnosticism that will talk about the demiurge and the archons and that reality or the world is a prison for the divine spark and that each of us is entombed in a body and that, you know, your body is dirty or evil or there's original sin. All of this crap that is completely, I call it perennial because it just keeps coming back. It's like a weed, this idea. And that it's attractive too. It's attractive because for whatever reason, there's always the option for human beings to choose a victimized posture because and the bigger the victim you can be, the more currency you can derive out of that to create an excuse for why your life isn't what you want it to be. And again, like I admitted to at the beginning of the show, I've done it. There's ways I'm still doing it, I'm sure. But when it comes to like the whole philosophy of a demiurge and the imperfect world that the demiurge creates in this mythos, there's just such a huge misunderstanding. And, most people are just repeating after each other over and over again, like going back to, they even cite like Plato talking about the demiurge and say, see, he was a Gnostic and he knew that the world was a fallen place and it was a prison for souls. But you read Plato, that is not the case. He does not refer to the demiurge as inherently evil or anything. He tries to give a allegorical description of why we see imperfection in the world. I think he does a good job, honestly, but it's really about like what gets repeated over and over again. You can see how that belief that the world is created by an evil sub-god below God is attractive to why it's your excuse that your life sucks, because you can't really get past that one. And the greatest part is, as I just referred to in this quote from Higgins, no one even has the capacity to know that. Nobody even has the capacity to know that. That's one of the I love Michael Tessarion for this too. He also disputes this type of Gnosticism really powerfully. And, he'll mention things like, how is it that you're commenting on other dimensions and higher realities that you actually have no way to know a damn thing about? Right. And if there's a God that's not the real God, that is evil and has trapped us here and doing all this nefarious stuff, why doesn't the real God that's the good God just fix it? Like, there's so many very simple things that are just logically destroy the whole premise. But the real as like the real mythological story of cycles and the creation and regeneration of the world and the demiurge figure, whenever you comprehend it properly, the demiurge is Jesus. The demiurge is also the Lucifer character that we talked about off air before we got on here. It's Bacchus, it's Dionysus, it's Hermes, it's Odin. It's all of these figures that are mediators, psychopomps, and a midwife for the soul, in a sense, the androgen beings. And even like, you also wanted to talk about Freemasonry a little bit. I will admit I haven't read a whole lot of Freemasonic authors, but I do know that they're extremely misquoted and misunderstood. And in some cases, even just outright lies are told about it. For example, people love to circulate the quote from Albert Pike about how they're going to start World War III and that Lucifer is God and all this. And people coming at that from having been raised in a Christian perspective are like, oh my God, he says that the devil is God. Oh no. First of all, like that quote, the one that goes around, isn't even a real quote as far as I know. Like it's just made up. Second of all, when an author or an esotericist like that talks about Lucifer, it's the same thing as talking about Phanes in, say, like Apollodorus or one of the ancient Greek authors, or the Orphic tradition, the pre-Plato tradition. and all that, where basically it's Brahma as well. There's a primordial chaos, and then from that arises a first being, first light. There's darkness, and then let there be light. That's Phanes. Lucifer means light bringer. It's the same guy. It's also Jesus. It says it in the Bible that Jesus is the firstborn of the dead. I've done lots of extensive work on this, and some people get upset at me about syncretizing, and we can talk about that too. Like, why do I do that? What's the value in that? Because many academics see syncretism as a bad word. Like, you should never do that.
Can you just describe or explain what syncretism actually means?
Syncretism is what I just did when I said Lucifer is Phanes, is Jesus, is the demiurge, is Brahma, is Bacchus, yada yada. Because you can do, there's two ways to approach this stuff, and people are either going to be lumpers or splitters. That's what I've found out. And I'm a lumper. What can I say? I lump it all together. And it's totally fine to be a splitter too. I mean, there's value in the cultural difference and nuance from one version of a story to another. Absolutely. There's absolutely value there. And then there's even truth to the splitting. I'm not saying that there isn't truth to that, but in my view, and you can even find this in like some of the earliest church fathers, like what's his name? Such and such of Hippo. I'm blanking on his name.
Yeah.
Augustine, St. Augustine of Hippo. In his work, City of God, he's like, look, I know that you guys are into having 3,000 different gods, one for every different possible aspect of life, and that's great. But isn't it a little risky to do that? I mean, you all agree that they're just aspects of the one God, Jove, the one God, Zeus. And what we do in Christianity is we just worship the one. And that way we're not leaving anything out, because it's kind of risky if you are worshiping the goddess of the hearth and the god of roads and the god of this and the god of that. But what if you forget the god of health or something? And then he gets pissed at you and strikes you down with a plague. All we're doing is the same thing as you're doing, but we're simplifying it so that we don't leave anything out. I mean, that's a lumper right there. I love it. I'm into the lumping. And it's fine to do the splitting too, because we're talking about the infinite and trying to consider the attributes of divinity. Well, it goes on and on. We can find more and more descriptors, because you can never encompass something infinite in a set finite amount of words or attributes. So I don't know, I'm kind of getting into some ramble here, but I'll let you rein me in.
No, it's, you mentioned know thyself. What does that mean to you? What is it? It's a question that, how do you even answer it? In my opinion, what do you make of it?
Well, my first brush up with this is probably, in the shortcuts of psychedelics that I experimented with in my 20s, dimethyltryptamine being the most powerful one. I had experiences where I would use this substance and everything would become animated and alive. I would look even at trees, and the whole outline of a tree would become like a head and a face. I'd look at the person next to me, look at the person on the other side of me. Everybody was me. Everybody was the chanceness. And that's going to sound like very, I don't know, egotistical, but it really wasn't about it being me as in this human individual. It was about, I was able to, in those transcendental states, to experience that, oh, there's only one life here. There's only one life. There's only one life. And that one life is the capital S self. That one life is the soul of the world. They call it the demiurge as well, the craftsman, that which creates everything and dispenses all of the pieces of soul into all of the individual bodies. But it's all one life. You can't really separate it out. We only do so from our perspective here in bodies, as, you can say whatever reason you want as to why we do it, but I think it's because it's fun. I think it's because it's fun. The peekaboo game, forgetting and remembering and all that. I do my best to just remember, though, that it's all me and I'm all you, but without the sort of socialist, that means that, we need to lose all individuality in the lumping. There's I get it. You can accuse me of being a lumper, but I'm also all about, I'm actually all about balance, really, when you get down to it. Um, but that's my best way of saying, like, what is the know thyself, is to realize that all is self, and that the self I'm talking about is a capital S self that's much bigger than your little egoic self. But your little egoic self is how you're going to interface with, perceive, and experience the big S self. So you need both, and it's great. And that's what I think it means. And then the other beauty of the know thyself inscription at the Oracle at Delphi is less often talked about, but there are actually two other lines. Certainty brings ruin, and nothing to excess. So, we got to also be aware of that the more we can stay in the I don't know state, the better. But a few things I do feel like are at least describable in a knowing way. I think that all is self is what it means by know thyself personally. But that doesn't mean that I know it perfectly, because we're talking about if all is self, then the self is infinite. It's a never ending journey of discovery. You're never going to actually get the full circumference and experience of the big self, maybe glimpses of it in transcendental states. But that's the source. You are that. You, like, what you are at your core, your true essence is the whole, which is why I like to talk about wholeness. It's why whenever people come to me for healing, I want to make sure, and sometimes certain people, I have to really go through this with them, other people not so much. But there's a lot of seekers out there that are seeking healing. They're seeking knowledge. They're seeking things from a place of feeling incomplete, right? Like, I've had clients where I was the fifth modality that they tried that week, and that they've been on a journey of doing this, that, and the other thing, left, right, and center, just going nuts with it. I'm like, look, you are approaching this healing stuff from a place of feeling broken, identifying with brokenness, and looking for the missing piece. And you're never really going to quite, feel like any of this is working or getting you somewhere until you look at the healing modality that you're interfacing with as an expression of your wholeness. Like, doing this is a reflection of me being already whole. I already know that. Who I am, the capital S self, is the whole enchilada, baby. And when I do these practices that get me in touch with the unconscious parts of myself and bring the unconscious into conscious, shine light into the dark corners, that's exactly what a whole being does. A whole being has access to the entire circumference of themselves. Yeah, I just watched my daughter get born. So that whole portal of life and death is really fresh in my mind right now. And my wife went through that experience in a state of wholeness through the whole thing, saying yes to all of it. It was the most incredible labor I think anybody ever witnessed. It was super fast. Nothing ever stalled out. Baby popped out. Everything was great. So, yeah, I hope people get that. Like, really identify with yourself, your true self being already whole, already perfect, already complete. It's the infinite. And then whenever you're going to approach something that you think is going to be for your good or to improve you, that you're not looking at it like, I need this because I'm broken or I'm missing a piece, but I'm doing this because this reflects that I'm already whole. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But ultimately, it leads me to the question is, what is it all for? That's the one that still gets me. Is I can understand what you just said. I can understand a different point of views as well. But you ultimately, what's the goal at the end of the day? Based on very, very smart, very, very smart philosophers from thousands upon thousands of years ago. If you go back to Hermes, we don't know when he was in the game, but Bacchus, all these, it's very old, all very similar stories. But to what end? What is the end point? What is the end goal, rather? What are we trying to achieve?
That's not an accusation, but just that very question, in my opinion, is the question of the seeker from a place of incompleteness.
Yeah.
Because you're looking for like, well, what's the end? If I can get to the goal, then that will complete it. But what if it's not like that? What if it is more circular and secular? I can't answer for anybody what the meaning of life is, but in my view, the meaning of life is life. The meaning of existence is to exist. So I look at that as like a perpetual thing, no beginning, no end. And that works for me. But, say, looking back at some of the farthest philosophy we can access, like Plato, in the Phaedrus, he has Socrates talking about the soul. And it's a really cool description where the soul is a tripartite nature. It's a charioteer with a good horse and a bad horse. And, long story short, the soul of a human, what makes it a soul of a human is that it's had a glimpse of the God realm, where God is at. It's had a glimpse. And he even describes that, like, our heavens, where our gods reside, that once you're up there, that there's a heavens for them too. And so there's the truth of the heavens, but then there's a truth above that truth. This is also Kabbalah. There's the Ein Sof or whatever, the layers above God, the pure light. So, I can't comment on the reality of that necessarily, but maybe there's concentric rings of existence. Maybe it goes on infinitely. I kind of see it that way. Like, you die, you're reborn. Death is the portal of death and the portal of birth are the same portal. Perhaps what we're in right now is some kind of a dream that we're having inside of the womb of a bigger body. And maybe that body is inside of a womb of a bigger body. I mean, my daughter was just born and she's already got the eggs of her future children in her while she's in my wife.
Yeah.
So like, that's what I like in terms of a chosen perspective, because that's the thing about philosophy. Nobody can actually tell you the ultimate answer in philosophy. There's logic. There's lots of great logic and a lot of great arguments, but regardless, eventually there's a point, they call it the ground in philosophy, that you have to choose. There's an unprovable ground that has to be, you got to, choose your ground, choose where you want to stand. And that's up to all of us. So I can't tell people, what their ground should be. My ground is that I think that we're in kind of an infinite recursion of wombs within wombs within wombs within wombs. Maybe it somehow forms a circle even and comes back around. I don't know. I'm actually cool with it. I'm cool with existing infinitely. Possibly there's forms outside of and worlds outside of this world or inside of this world, you could say, that we could ascend or descend to. But I can't comment on dimensions and realities that I have only maybe experienced in the imaginal realm or not at all. So that's the thing. Like, I'm not going to make claims of things I don't know about. But hopefully that kind of answers where I come from.
I'll give you I have a friend who's he's from Nepal. He's Nepalese, from the Himalayas. He was born, her firstborn son, and where he lives, you're automatically become a monk. So he had to get up first, wash himself, meditate, pray, and then he became a Gurkha, which is the soldiers of Nepal who become part of the British Army, which is very, very hard to do. I think 35,000 applied for his intake, and he got, I think they took, something like 200. So it's, you can imagine these are very strong, tough mountain guys living at, 15,000 or 13,000 feet or whatever it is. And I've done 2 podcasts with him, and I've met him a couple of times, and he's such a nice guy. And I said, what do you read? What do you study? And he goes, I don't study anything. I just, I meditate, I do my practices, I do my yoga. When he talks about yoga, it's not necessarily stretching. There's a different aspect to it. But he said, I don't read anything. And I guess for me is unsatiably curious. I'm always looking for, trying to find the answer. But yeah, so I completely get what you mean. It's
Me too.
It's almost.
I love reading.
Yeah, I mean,
back to Plato, he's like, he always puts it in the mouth of Socrates that, is the question is always posed: is writing actually good for us? is that actually helpful or not? Because before the tradition, the Platonic tradition, it was mostly oral. It was rare that things were getting written down. And the way people were writing things down were politicians, essentially, for giving speeches. So that's a worthwhile question, because you can have all of the writing in the world, but without the internal illumination, there's really no point to it. Like, I mean, I shouldn't say there's no point. It can be fun, but
I know what you mean. I know what you
yeah,
mean. I know what you're trying to say.
it comes from
So
within, though.
yeah, well, that's what he was saying. And it's like that just doesn't, as you said, I'm asking by asking that question, you're asking you're not asking the right question. And yeah, anyway, but what I was going to, the Freemasonry got to the point where I was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. But we were talking about before we started about the founding fathers of the United States, who I think the main ones we know were all Freemasons, and you can tell that by the layout of Washington, D.C., the architecture. They have the obelisks, all of the symbolism that we have come to know and love through various, books like Dan Brown and all this other, sensationalist media. And the point that I was listening to a podcast about it, actually, and the gentleman who was talking about was saying that they were, I guess you're going to call them 33-degree top level Freemasons, and that they didn't believe in the God, the Christian God, I think you would call it. They were actually believer. Their God was Lucifer or Bacchus or Hermes, which one of these, that whatever that word was that you used for different incarnations of the same person, same being, whatever it was. And
yeah, in the Orphic tradition, pre-Platonian tradition, it's called protagonos, which means the firstborn, essentially. And this is the firstborn of the first cause. This is the primordial mind. And believe it or not, that's actually the same God as in the Old Testament and New Testament. But the religious types, they've completely lost sight of it. It has a lot to do with the way that things have been translated in the Bible that is, just kind of flat out deceptive. There's like one version of this being is Adonis, right? Well, riddle me this. Why in the Hebrew of the Old Testament that dozens or hundreds of times they refer to God or Yahweh as Adonai? That's Adonis. It's the same dude. Even the name Yad-Heh-Vav-Heh or Jehovah, which is the Tetragrammaton, if you transliterate that, it could also be spelled Jeue or Jeve or Ieve or Ieue. So that's Jew, that's you, that's Eve, that's Yov, etc. So Bacchus was actually worshipped as a serpent called Eve, according to Tacitus, and I think a few other ancient writers. So it's the same dude. I look at it like this. I think the best way to describe it would just to be get to the philosophy behind it rather than the syncretism of it, which is, all right, you have everything is one life, right? we've already got into that. There's one life. A great conception of the one life is the tree of life. We see that all the time. Okay, so if there's a tree of life, all living beings are parts of this tree. And maybe we're like branches, or we're like leaves, or we're like flower buds. But there's a trunk of this tree. And what grew first? The trunk grew first, and there's roots too. And so the thing that connects all of the branches and the leaves, this central pole or axis, that's the firstborn. That's the being we're talking about. It's the first mind. When you think about it too, like, of course, there's been a ton of boogeymanning done to the word Lucifer, right? And I'm not telling people to go out and like worship Lucifer. At this point, it's stupid to do that because you're going to just rub people the wrong way. And in fact, I don't think there's any need to worship anything outside of yourself at all. But if you recognize that there's a primordial, first existing aspect of consciousness. Like there's the one mind, there's the whole God, full imagination of the divine. And then from that is the first reflection that emerges, or the duad or dyad, where it sees itself and it starts to know itself or question itself. That's the firstborn that we're talking about. And then further divisions would occur from there, maybe giving you like a pantheon, and maybe giving you like demigods, and then maybe giving you the first human beings, all the way down and down in the line of division until you get to the millions or billions of people as we know it today. But they're all connected by this one pillar, this one trunk. And that's they call it the soul of the world. That's the thing that's dispensing life force energy to everything else. And so you're connected to it intrinsically from within yourself. It's the inner light of yourself. It's the light of your mind, specifically. They call this being the nous. Like all of Noah is a great example of this, because Noah, actually, the name means mind. In philology, H and K and S, they're all interchangeable letter. So, and it's not even really argued about that nous and Noah are the same word, because in the Hebrew, it's just the letters nun, tet. So that's how you would spell, potentially how you might spell nous in Hebrew. It's a way to spell it, meaning mind. It's the same idea as like in the Orphic hymns, they talk about Kronos being the mind or the soul of the world. And then a bunch of other gods that they describe exactly the same way, because they're just different aspects of the one being. So, and so anytime you have a figure that is the father of a multitude, or the father of humanity, like Noah or like Abraham or like Adam, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the primordial first being that everything is coming out of, which there's literally nothing evil about that. And in fact, I think that my personal belief is that being is completely real and exists. It's totally, I mean, I don't necessarily subscribe to that aspect of being incarnating into a human body and walking around and performing miracles. I don't need that personally. I see those as allegory to help people get the point of connecting to the one. But you know, if there's a trunk of this tree of life that we're all part of, it makes sense to me that first mind would want to guide the life that is growing out of it to harmony and balance and coherence, and to the highest level of health and success possible. And that's why these beings that are syncretized or lumped together, like Hermes and Bacchus and etc., are psychopomps, because of course they're going to be the ones conducting souls, because they're the ones that the souls are coming from, you know. And lots of ancient authors, by the way, straight up just say that Noah and Bacchus are the same guy. 100%. Right. Little known fact about Noah, for example, he taught humanity the art of making wine. So
same as Bacchus, right?
Yeah, it's the same dude.
Yeah. Well, it brings me back to what I mentioned at the very start about. So I'm just on this particular point of the founding fathers of the United States.
Yeah,
is they've got their viewpoint, which it might have been widely known at the time, but we certainly we're not taught that. I think my point, what I'm trying to say is you've got
what I understand is that they're deists. So
okay.
Deist means that they believe that God created the world like the way a watchmaker builds a watch or a clock. It has natural laws that govern it, and God built it and set it and left it like a big terrarium and it self-regulates. And God doesn't necessarily intervene with miracles per se. So they kind of I actually like that. They de-supernaturalize their whole version of religion. And instead they're like, our religion is looking at the way that nature works. What are the rules of this place? How does the system operate? Let's get ourselves in alignment with how those rules work, that natural law, which to me is the essence of the whole game anyway. Because to me, like they say, like the wages of sin is death, right? And in the Christian mythology, for most people, that means that if you are naughty and all that, then you go to the lake of fire, etc. But you can be as naughty as you want as long as you say the right prayer and get saved, then you're fine after you die. But to this type of deist philosophy, which I think is actually pretty apt, they're saying, hey, sin is when you do things that are against the law of nature. And we know that when we do things that are against the law of nature, we actually have immediate consequences to our health and to our life. So there's not like some tally Santa Claus making a list and checking it twice. By the way, the same idea. That's the same idea as religions anyway. No, there's not that. There's immediate consequence to whether or not you're living in accordance with the law of nature. I think that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, it does. And, but that's, but mention the fact that you're talking about a little bit about hidden knowledge, but why the foundation of the United States was so, revolutionary in several senses, is because that's not what the rest of certainly the Christian world, the Western world, would call it, we're being led to believe. And then, so when you hear this stuff, it was quite sensationalist, about how they were worshippers of Lucifer, and with all those connotations. And then he was talking about how that Lucifer was the god of liberty, god of freedom, and freedom to do free will. Let's call it free will. That's probably the easiest way to do it. And but as you say, no one wants to be a worshipper of Lucifer. But as you put it, the natural law aspect, which is something I've been quite keen on for a while now, makes a lot more sense. Is that there are immediate repercussions, and putting money in
the funny thing about Lucifer too is Lucifer is not the devil in the Bible. All of this is pop culture snowball shit with Lucifer. I mean, right. I really mean that. Lucifer, the best way to understand Lucifer in the Bible is that it's a name for Venus, the morning star, which is also Jesus. By the way, like all the epithets and descriptions of Lucifer, of which there are very few in the Bible itself, and that's the oldest account that we get of a name called Lucifer, all the same epithets are applied to Jesus. So I don't get
Bringer
it.
of light.
Like, what's the big deal here? I'm not telling people to be Luciferian. If you put that on your sleeve today, you're gonna freak people the hell out, right? Don't do that. You don't need to do that. But don't be afraid of it like it's some kind of boogeyman. Or that if you find out somebody else was like pro Lucifer, but everything that they ever did was beautiful and harmonious and not evil, as far as you can tell, then great. There's nothing to be worried about. Like I drive down the road in my town, and there's a part of a street where it's like, this part of the road is adopted to be cleaned up by the Church of Satan. And I'm like, you guys are idiots. Like, why do you want people that do that, they're identifying with the boogeyman and the bad man? That's stupid. They're doing that from a place of like needing to be that transgressive gamma male type to, for their own problems, right? You don't need to do that. But my only point is you don't need to be freaked out by it. That's all. And all even the devil, even Satan, it's all astrotheological. Dylan and I did a huge episode about two parts actually about the devil, and demonstrating that the devil, the god of this world, as they call it, is the demiurge, is God, all the same thing, and is fine. Like the word, even diabolos in Greek, where we get diablo, and that's where we get the word devil, because B in Greek, the beta becomes a V sound. So diabol becomes devil, right? No big deal. In German, the D swaps to a T. So the devil becomes Tuval. Tufel, right. Yeah, exactly. And in Hebrew, the word for world is Tubal. So devil and world, same thing, right? And in astrotheology, they say where the devil is, diabolos is said to be the opposer or adversary. That's just talking about wherever the sun is at in the sky, whatever constellation the sun is in, whatever is diametrically opposite to that is currently the devil. No big deal. That's the opposer. So every sign gets a chance to be the devil for a while. It's fine. Like there's nothing to actually be scared of, in my opinion. It's in terms of like the idea of a tempter or the idea of evil, that's all coming from within you. Like you make your choice. You get to decide whether or not to do good or evil. It's there's no external force that is making you do it. And if you want to believe that, then keep on committing sin until you're so unhealthy that you have to start the game over. That's up to you. Fine. But no one's making you do it. At least own it that like you did it yourself if you're doing something wrong. That's the first step to being right, is saying I was wrong, not the devil made me do it. It's so ridiculous. I could go on and on.
No, but that makes
It
it's
makes
a very good point. And for me, I've done quite a few of these more, so should we say, philosophical podcasts, and nothing really seemed, sometimes like, for instance, my friend who was the monk. By the way, that guy, he was one of the first Gurkhas to become the UK Special Forces guy. So he was in the SAS. And there was two of them got in at the same time, and the other guy was Nymph's Die. The 14 Peaks guy on Netflix, the climber who did all the peaks above 8,000 meters in Nepal.
Sounds like a legend.
Yeah. So he that really struck me, and I couldn't really get to the point of what he was trying to say. Was I don't read anything. I just meditate and find the answers inside me. And I thought, well, how the hell do you do that? And then that's what, when you read all these different texts, it says the same thing. The answers are within you. But what for us, certainly for me, it's, I need a roadmap. You got to tell me how to do it. But I think, as you said, you're asking the wrong question, and you don't need a roadmap. But
again, as I said at the beginning, if you really want to be connected to God or the source, it's going to feel like you're making it up. That's called creativity. That's what the creator is. So your buddy that just meditates and finds the answers from within himself, he's good to go. That's all. Yeah. That's fine. I mean, wouldn't that have been how we were when we showed up and there was not books to read? Honestly, like, I love the puzzle of it. I love the pattern recognition of it. I like weaving things together and untangling things. That's fun for me. That's why I'm into what I'm into. And sometimes people have got such a weave, a tapestry of confusion that they've wrapped around their head and their perception, that the only way to get them out of it is to untangle it a piece at a time. And so I'm happy to do that because that's fun for me. I like the pattern recognition and the puzzle of it, but it's not like I need it. I've been, especially after having a daughter, I'm feeling more like I could just take it or leave it with this stuff. Not that it isn't fun anymore, but that I'm not like looking for something to complete myself. And
is this your first child?
Yeah. That's why I probably look kind of haggard right now. Like, we're 5 days in, but she's great, dude. She's great. I coded her name with gematria and everything.
Did you? What's her name?
So, in the English cipher called septenary, which is based on sevens, that the King James Bible is actually ciphered in septenary. You go to Gnostic Church and Academy of Lord Jesus Christ with my buddy Marty Lees, you'll learn all about that. So
I need to speak to him, by the way.
Oh, sure. He's awesome.
Yeah.
And he'll do a good job, reinforcing what I'm talking about, that there's no need to make a boogeyman out of any devils or demiurges. But yeah, I named her Gracie Gabriella, and my last name's Garton. So her initials are GGG, which is 777 because G is the seventh letter. And her name adds up in the septenary cipher to 77. And then just to like really nail it in, she decided to be born at 3:14, which is pi, 3:14 p.m.
Yep. Wow.
Yeah.
And you got John 3:14,
child.
Isn't it? That's what another one comes up. And so you got pi. That's another. Yeah. That's
she's
another
a pious
one.
child. That's what I've been saying.
Yeah.
Very pious.
3:14. Yeah.
And then my wife and I got married on March 14th. So there's a 3:14.
That's Pi
cool
Day.
Synchronicities.
International Pi Day. Well, Chance, mate, that was kind of not really what I was going to thinking we were going to talk about, but I think
Well, let's
that's
do it again, man. I'm like,
but
let
that's
me catch up a little bit on rest too, and we'll plan it a little better, and I can come with even more specific details and examples if you want to get into certain subjects. But
yeah.
I mean, I had fun talking to you. This is great.
But well, me too. But it's often the case that I come in here with a list of things I want to cover, but I get given the podcast that I need to hear, if that makes sense. And I call it, well, we talk about no coincidences around here. It's all, there's no such thing. And,
If I can give advice, I mean, a little bit of advice about people that are interested in these subjects, esoteric stuff, mythology, the nature of reality and all that, is be really careful about whether or not you just take somebody's word for stuff. Even me. Go read source material yourself. That's the only way that you're going to be that's the closest you can get to it coming from within, is that you go read the source material for yourself. Especially when somebody's telling you a boogeyman story. I'm not saying there aren't bad actors or evildoers in the world, but most of the time, whatever a big group of people are pointing at and saying that's their fault, it's their fault that there's something wrong with me, or it's their fault this, it's their fault that, they're probably addicted to something terrible. And they're hiding that from you with their public face. I say that because in the in the biofield of human beings, there's this very fascinating phenomenon that people who are engaging in blame are people who are addicts. It just goes together. So, I mean, be aware of that you got to really check your sources. If you're listening to somebody that's offering you a big smorgasbord of people to blame your problems on, they might be on drugs or they might be addicted to something else terrible. I'm just saying, that's very much my experience working with human psychology in a direct one-to-one way. And just, get yourself out of the blame game. Take responsibility for everything that you possibly can. One of the most powerful grounds of philosophy that you can stand on is, because again, we have to choose our ground, is to equate spirit or your true self with free will. Back to Bacchus being called Liber, which means free, and it also means book, is that I personally think even the stuff that seems to happen to us outside of our control in life, even major violations, that on some level, even before we came into a life, that we chose that. I think we chose everything. I think that choice is synonymous with life and existence. You can take it or leave it, but it's very powerful to choose that you have choice in everything.
I was going to,
because again, even in the stuff that you didn't want to happen to you or someone did evil to you, on a long enough timeline, it works out better for you that happened.
Yeah.
So why not just own it? Yep, I chose that.
So I wasn't going to bring, well, no, I was going to finish it up, but we're just going to go one more topic if that's okay. You got another 5 minutes?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So I've often said this, about the trauma that we've got this sort of trauma industry going on right now. And I'm not saying people take it from me. I mean this from a good place. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not saying that people haven't had very, very traumatic things happen to them. I was in the army, so I know a lot of people who had very traumatic things happen to them. But I've been thinking, so maybe some of this has been rubbing off on me, is that, I have friends who are, well-meaning, saying, you should dive into your trauma, resolve that trauma, and go on with your life, And I felt, well, look, I've made peace with it. It's part of me now, and without that particular trauma or whatever happened that has made me what I am, is, that's just part of it. As you said, these things happen, and that's what you have to deal with in life, and that's part of it. And I sometimes think that, if you start digging into old trauma, that I'm not sure that do you know what I mean? Are you actually making things better, or are you making things worse? Are you just going to keep that on your mind? Or are you going to start blaming that on someone else, or blaming yourself for not being able to live your life because of this trauma.
There's a lot of talk about trauma in healing, of course, right? So I'll sum it up in the best nutshell possible. What actually helps us? What actually heals trauma? You know, it's not knowing what happened or knowing how it made you feel. You can revisit what happened and how it made you feel over and over again. And you probably will until you get to this one, just do this one trick and you'll heal your trauma. No, but the trick to it is if you can wrap your arms around how the trauma affected your behavior, your belief about what your personality is, and your expectations about what life is, that's how you heal it. Because what trauma does is it creates conditioning. It creates adaptations. And we mistake those adaptations as personality. And we've been taught that our personality that's just who we are. But back to the beauty of choice is you can even choose your personality. So if you can get to the root of like, okay, this experience made me think that I needed to act like this. And I started acting like this so much that I thought that this is just what I'm like. But actually I had a choice about that. And this came from the trauma. If I had like my client notebook, I could pull out an example, but I've been on vacation for a week. So my mind is fuzzy on specific examples. Right. But I have dozens and hundreds probably of clients where we found, well, let's just go to a commonplace example. Okay. Because again, I just had a child. And so when my wife gave birth, she talked about the moment of the baby coming out being like the greatest feeling ever, like this release, this relief, this satisfaction, fulfilling feeling, just like oh, yes, it's out. Okay. Now, what happens? This is what happens in a natural birth every time. What happens though if a baby is born C-section? Okay, you've had 9 months in the womb. You're going through labor. You're building up. It's like a project that you've been working on for a long time, and you're about to put the last Lego piece on the puzzle, and it's going to be done. But then somebody comes and smashes the whole thing right then at the end. Okay, so people who are born C-section, they very commonly have repetitive experiences in life, that things that they are building up or working on in life that they're seeking satisfaction out of or fulfillment from, that near the end, near the culmination, somebody pulls the rug out from under it and it all falls apart, and they never quite get that satisfying, almost like orgasmic, yes, completion, fulfillment. And it's not that they can never get it, but that it's commonly the case that gets interrupted or sabotaged. And just in general, they have a lot of like frustration built up from the way that they came into the world. And so they might develop adaptations to that where they avoid long-term projects. They avoid big goals. It's going to be different for different people. They'll have an individuated version of how they've adapted to that basically unprocessed frustration energy that came about in their birth. But the point is, everybody that's born C-section is going to have something like that, or maybe some kind of guilt complex that derives from the fact that the way they were born caused a type of injury to their mother being cut open. But that's my point. And then you can help somebody, or someone can help themselves see the root of how that trauma affected this expectation that this is going to happen in life, and then let it go. Like, oh, that came from there. That's not just intrinsic to me. That was conditioning. I can let that go. I can choose that that's not how it is. I can choose to, and it takes work. You got to repattern yourself. Sure. You got to have a perception filter that says, notify me whenever I'm about to reenact this particular conditioning so I can choose something different. But it's doable. It's completely doable. And then you've resolved the trauma for real, because you figured out how it affected your behavior, your perception of your personality, and what you thought life was. And you changed it with your free will. And now that's actually behind you. Now you've really processed that trauma. And that's how it works. That's my opinion. And I've seen it in so many people. I've seen it work for so many people. You don't even have to rehash every example of trauma, because in this example I'm giving, people have recurring rug pull moments that reflect that C-section birth, but we don't have to go find, in a tuning session every time that ever happened to them. We just find one or two so that we can establish, okay, there's a pattern here, right? Right. And then like pulling a weed out by the roots rather than just cutting off the top leaves, we can clear all of the energetic debris around that pattern in one shot. And it really works that way. It's amazing.
Right. We definitely have to do, next time we do a podcast, we're going to have to talk about the biofield tuning. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, man. I'll send you some of my videos on it. You can have prepared questions. I love talking about that.
Yeah. All right. That sounds good. Well, Chance, thanks very much for coming on. I think I might have had a bit of a breakthrough here. That's some stuff coming out. And just a great pleasure to speak to you. I know you're busy, and I want you to get back to your daughter, Gracie. My little brother has a GGG in his name as well, his initials. I don't think that was not geometrically planned. That was purely coincidence. Well, there's no coincidences there, but there you go. So thanks very much for coming on. Thanks for listening, and catch you next time. Bye-bye.